Thank you. Good morning. Welcome to the Susanville Seventh-day Adventist Church. It's our lesson study time, and we will be studying from the quarterly lesson 7, Ultimate Loyalty, Worship in a War Zone, for November 8 to 15. And this is page 56 if you're in a regular quarterly, and if you have the teacher's quarterly, it's page 85.
Okay, let's start off with a word of prayer. Let's bow our heads. Our Father in heaven, thank you for the things that we have here as we go through. These were not just written as stories to have for historical reference. These are written as examples of how we deal with God, how God deals with us, how we need to deal with people. And there's lots of lessons in here. Help us to be able to see those lessons that you have for us today. And we ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. I find it kind of interesting because I don't know if you've noticed, as we're going through Joshua and these lessons, it's not just going through Joshua from one to the end of the book. It's going, because we've already had the Achan's thing, we've had the attack on AI that failed. Now we're going backwards before all of that. And it's kind of interesting that, I don't know about you, but sometimes it's kind of, I'm used to going through chronological things. I was born as a baby. Now that's kind of hard. I don't know if you knew that, but I wasn't bald when I was born either. So that's a new thing. But and we
a lot of babies are bald when they're born.
We're looking at our life and our things. We look at the different stuff, and we have a chronological view of things. These lessons here in Joshua are not set up that way. They're going back and forth on different things because they have a point to go. I also find it's interesting, the lessons that they have in here about, this is like they crossed the Jordan, and then these things, they had the circumcision, and they had the Passover, and they had the dedication part at Mount Ebal and stuff that actually took place after the attack on Jericho. But they were things of putting God first, trusting in God and putting their faith in God and trying to get that lesson in. And we're going to have the circumcision. We're going to dedicate ourselves to God. We're going to have the Passover. We have these other parts where we meet and dedicate ourselves to God and with the blessings and the curses and the different things at Mount Ebal. And then do we always follow that? Did they follow that? One of the stories that we have coming up next, after these things happen, God's trying to get them to put him first, and then they go attack Ai without asking him what to do. Do we do that? In my life, many, many, many times, I've just gone into things without necessarily asking God, what do you want me to do on this? Recently, talking to people talking to my brother, and he said, when I got married, I never asked God whether that was something I should have done or not. And I'm thinking, well, yeah, that's true. We didn't do stuff like that. Do we do it now? Do we take those lessons in? And I think that's one of the big things that we need to take about. I have a thing that I've been telling people. If you think you know what you're doing, what should you do? Pray. If you don't think you know what you're doing, we kind of say, yeah, I need to pray then. Whatever we're doing, we need to pray about what we're doing. We need to pray about God be with us as we go to church and Sabbath school today. Help us to my thing is, because I don't have those words to speak, I need God to give me words to speak. If I'm relying on my wisdom, we're in trouble. And I tried to put that in. But I haven't always done that. And I still fail at that sometimes. Sometimes I just do things. Have you ever just done things?
Well,
I think all of us could probably raise our hands that we just did things. And the circumstances seemed that we ended up there, and that's where we're at. And we didn't ever ask God about it.
well, in our memory verse, it says, seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. That's from Matthew 6:33, ESV.
Boy, and if we took that to heart, seek God first, and all these things will be added on you. If we thought about that on everything we do, boy, would our lives be different. They'd be better, because we would seeking, and we have a whole bunch of different exercises for us to do, and I don't want to belabor the thing but offerings and tithes and all that stuff is the same thing. Putting God first. We say we're Christians. Everybody says, I'm a Christian, but yet do we put God first? Because that's what it means. I'm putting Christ first in my life. And anyways, we'll go on here. I'm belaboring.
Now, one of the things that I have noticed, the question that comes up with the title of this lesson, Ultimate Loyalty, Worship in a War Zone. Where's a better place to worship? And when I read this, the first person I think of is Desmond Doss. He got boots thrown at him pretty much every morning and probably every evening, because he was on his knees talking to God before he left the barracks, before he did anything.
If you've seen that little clip from the movie Hacksaw Ridge, they have a clip, and it's, why isn't the platoon going? We're waiting for Desmond. Desmond who? He's studying his Sabbath school lesson, and when he gets done, then we'll attack.
That's not how they started. When
But
they started, they
learned
did
that
not listen.
In fact, the men, if you ever watched the movie Hacksaw Ridge, which I'm not necessarily advocating that it's a violent movie, but there's some really good parts in there about Desmond. And they didn't, if you read the story, there's like this much, there's this part of the story, and there's this part of the story, and all in the middle isn't there, because they had all kinds of things to where his company had attacks at other places, and they learned that they could rely on Desmond, and he did heroic things on rescuing, to the point that it came to the point that they wouldn't go without Desmond. God was with him, and they weren't going to go without him.
And I believe there have been other war heroes with the same thing.
Since we
with them.
Had veterans this week.
Because God was with them.
And I've told people this, the reason that I went into nursing is I met Desmond Doss when I was I must have been around 12, and he spoke at camp meeting, and he had a hard time speaking because in the course of all his stuff and recovery of the stuff, he ended up getting TB, and at the time they knew that antibiotics, penicillin, was effective on what he had, but they gave him way too much penicillin, and he went deaf. And so when you're deaf, you don't always know what you sound like. And so you had to really listen to Desmond Doss, because he wasn't very clear on his speaking. But it had an impact on me. And then my dad and my uncle were medics in World War II, and my other uncle was a medic during the Korean War, and so I decided I wanted to be a medic. And then someone said, well, if you go into nursing, you can be working at a hospital and, doing some other stuff and have, you'll be at a higher rank. And so I went into nursing, and at about that time the Vietnam War was over, so it was kind of like a mute point in some ways. But that had an impact on my whole life, that story. So anyways, and things do have an impact on our life.
So I have a question. Who here is now or has been in a war zone? Good. Somebody's honest. Thank you.
Well, that's not a good thing that you were in a war zone.
No, but it's good you're honest. Thank you. Did you know we're all in a war zone right now? Yeah. And that's a big, big deal. And it's very real. It is not imaginary.
Some people consider some of our inner cities a war zone.
Yeah.
Well,
And where you work is sometimes a war zone.
You're in a war zone. I had a thing to hear. You pardon me, Lynn. Go ahead. But
Well, I saw somebody who looked like they might be going to say something, but I'm not going to force you or put you on the spot. But if you have something to say, please do. So the war zone is real. And my brother-in-law is actively fighting in that spiritual war. And there are a lot of people in this community and other places who are actively involved in the spiritual war. If things are going great for you, you're not a threat to the devil.
I have this thing, and you've heard me say this before. I was in doing the lesson the last time we did it a few weeks ago. The battle going on in heavenly places occasionally spills over into our realm, because we said we fight not against flesh and blood, we fight against principalities, against powers of darkness in heavenly places. It says we become participants in battles either on God's side or Satan's side. Many times in the Bible, the people there, and we're looking at it, are merely bystanders as God fought in their behalf. And we think of crossing the Red Sea. God said, the Egyptians that you see, you'll never see again, and you won't have to fight in this battle. God did that fighting. We're there, but God's doing the battle. Jehoshaphat's battle. That's if you've never heard that, that's in 2 Chronicles chapter 20. Jehoshaphat is the king of Judah. There's three nations that are going to attack them. They get word of that. He calls everybody together at Jerusalem. They have a big prayer meeting. And then a prophet stands up and he says, God has said that you're going to be delivered, and you don't need to fight in the battle. It's the Lord's battle. So when you go out to where, like in your armies or whatever, go out, but the Lord will do your fighting. And then the very interesting on that, Jehoshaphat, the next morning when they go out, he said, let's put the church choir in front of the army. Darrell, would that be number one thing you do if you had an army? You'd go put the church choir in front and you go attack?
Absolutely not.
That's not the usual way. And the interesting thing in there is that when the praises came out of their mouth, the victory was won. God gave them the victory. Other times were limited participants, such as David and Goliath, Jonathan and his armor bearer. But we get glimpses of it, and one of the glimpses of that battle going on is Elisha and the Syrians. The Syrians wanted to capture Elisha. He's a prophet. They send out the army, surround Dothan in the morning. Elisha's servant goes open up the windows, and the town is surrounded by the Syrian army. And he said, what do we do? And Elisha said, those are with us are more than those that are with them. And he's going, it's just you and me. And he says, he prays to God, open his eyes, and he opens his eyes and he sees a whole angel army of fire around them. He got a glimpse of that. Evidently, Elisha could see that. Some people have that ability to see things, but that is a big glimpse of what we have going on behind the scenes that we don't see. Did you know that we have an angel army around us? We don't always
I think that's
about
very
that, do we?
comforting. Having an angel army around us is comforting. And reading mission stories where they were going to be killed. And later, the people saw the missionaries and said, "Who were those men all dressed in white surrounding your house?" Those things are comforting, because guess what? What God did for the missionaries, what God did for the Israelites, what God does is not just for them. He'll do it for you. And whatever you're going through, He wants to be part of it. He says, spread out your case before the Lord. That's what, Zerubbabel? Who was the king that spread out the case before the Hezekiah? Hezekiah went, he actually went to the temple. He didn't go in any further than he was allowed, but he just laid the letter out and said, "Okay, Lord, here it is. Please take care of me and us and the nation." And God did.
And figuratively, we can do that when we're praying to God. God, here's the stuff that we're facing. It looks overwhelming. Hezekiah, the whole Assyrian army was there. And, it's overwhelming. But God, here it is, I'm laying it out in front of you.
When you don't have an Assyrian army, but maybe you get a foreclosure statement in the mail, you can spread that out before the Lord. Maybe it's something else. Maybe it's the proverbial pink slip, not for your car.
I've experienced that, getting fired before, and that's
So have I.
very traumatic when you get
Very.
fired. And I've experienced that, and I didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
Didn't know what to do.
But God offers to help. Yes, Daryl.
Well, David and Goliath.
Yes.
That was way, way back then.
Right.
And we had our own David and Goliath just recently with Charlie Kirk.
Mm-hmm.
God sacrificed one and woke up millions and millions of Christians around the world.
Yes.
And it's just amazing, the ceremonial aspects of his death, with thousands and thousands of people coming together and celebrating his death. And it's sad that he died so young, but to me that's just like David and Goliath. He's actually won in his process of being a true Christian and his faith.
Yes. And they meant it for evil. They were trying to silence a voice. But God turned it into something to honor His own name, God's
and in
name.
the same way, David put his trust in God first.
Okay, so on Sunday, they're talking about covenant first. Okay, say you get that foreclosure letter, or you get your pink slip, and with the pink slip there's severance pay.
Well, not everybody would get that.
You might not even get severance pay.
How about getting notice that you have cancer?
People have gotten those. Okay, well, what I was going to ask is, what's the first thing you're going to do? The reason I threw the severance pay in there is because with the severance pay, you think, well, this will tide me over till I find something, hopefully. And you're wondering, maybe you have your fingers crossed behind your back or something. But here's the thing. Do you pay tithe on that severance pay? Is that the first thing you do? That'd be putting God first. Covenant first. Don't we have a covenant with God? Go there first. this covenant first starts with the idea of circumcising people. And you recall back in the days when Jacob had first come back to Canaan. Here he is with his kids, and his daughter goes to town to meet with the girls because she's got all these brothers. And she gets raped. And the guy who rapes her falls in love with her and wants to marry her, and he goes and asks for her hand in marriage. And her brothers are so angry that she was raped that it's like, no way, no how. But that's not what they said. They said, if you guys will get circumcised, you all get circumcised, then, yeah, we'll marry your women and you can marry our sisters. Yeah, we'll do that. And they had no intention of following through. The guys were so interested, especially in Dinah. She must have been beautiful. Her mother was. Her grandmother was. Her great-grandmother was. I mean, that was a family of beautiful women, at least in the eyes of these people. So they said, yeah, these are beautiful women. Yeah, we'll take that. We'll take you up on that. So they all got circumcised, and the brothers went in and slaughtered every male in town while they were sore and couldn't fight back. Now, that's not cool. That's not Christian. But it's what they did. So, if you're circumcised, you're sore. And I came across that in Indonesia, which is a strongly Muslim country. And when the little boys were about 6, before 6, they were running around in a t-shirt and nothing underneath, nothing below the waist. At 6, you suddenly saw they had a sarong on it, and they had their hand pulling it out away from them because it was too sore to have anything touching it. And from then on, they wore something below the waist. But so you knew when a kid had been circumcised because, first recently circumcised, because that's what he was doing. They were sore. They weren't living their life normal. But they would be circumcised on the 8th day. Now, Israel is circumcising people who are way beyond the 8th day. And that's going to be even more difficult to deal with. It's going to hurt more, I'm pretty sure. And I've had a couple friends who told me they were circumcised later in life. One of them, I think, was 50. And it was not easy. But there was a good reason for his. Some of the others, I'm not so sure.
But the question arises, the Bible doesn't spell it out. That's one thing that's not in there. You don't see why in the 40 years of desert wandering, they had the tabernacle, they had the services going on. It doesn't make it clear why they were not circumcised up till now. That's not clear in there why that was, but whatever the reason was, up until this point, they weren't circumcised. Circumcision had been something that had been going on, but Moses,
Even in
when
other
he
places.
returns when God sends him to deliver the Israelites from Egyptian bondage, his sons weren't circumcised. If you look at that story, kind of an odd story in Exodus, but there was an angel that came, and Zipporah saw this angel was going to kill Moses, and because he hadn't circumcised it was the putting in there the importance of doing it. But we don't have, and evidently they haven't been circumcised. This circumcision hadn't been going on for 40 years at least. Why? Don't know.
What was the circumcision about? Anybody remember the meaning? What the symbolism is? Yeah. It was a complete commitment to God in every area, even the most intimate parts of your life.
And so what would be the equivalent of that now, then the lesson that brought that out? The baptism. Baptism is our covenant relation. That's saying, I want everybody to know that I'm following Christ. I want to be baptized. And it's the public declaration of my covenant relationship with God. It's a result of my giving my life to God. Now I want to make that public. And there's parts in there, Jesus says, he who denies me, I will deny. But he who acknowledges that I'm the Lord, I will acknowledge him. And that goes in part on that covenant relationship, baptism, circumcision, those things saying, yes, I'm willing to go through this, and I want everybody to know that I am following God. I am a Christian, not only in name, but I'm willing to do something about it. Does that make sense?
Now there's a question I have. When you're circumcised on the 8th day, is that a commitment you are making to God?
It's a commitment that your parents are making for you.
Yes. My parents make that commitment. But we don't baptize children when they're babies.
Well, some churches do.
Some churches do.
But
we
have put it in as it needs to be a decision that we make as an adult for baptism, that commitment. And that's not something you could do as a baby.
Circumcision is no longer a covenant.
True.
No.
It's a practice.
It is now, yes.
And it has nothing to do with your relationship with
No.
God in this day in which we live.
No, that was the original purpose.
It was their thing, and as the lesson puts it in, that solemnity of that and that covenant part would be transferred over to the baptism ceremony, is the way that they have it in there. I had never thought of that as that way until I looked at the lesson, actually.
The covenant that we have today is the promise from God that he will write his laws on our heart
Correct.
and change us from the inside out.
Yes.
And it uses the term circumcision of the heart. But also in Ezekiel, it uses the term that not only is he going to write his law on our hearts, he's going to give us a heart transplant. Take out our stony heart that we all have
And give us a heart of flesh.
And then Jeremiah says he's going to write his law on our hearts. And it talks about the circumcision of the heart. But it's, God is asking for a commitment for us. And we go through, as we started off, I don't remember if you weren't quite in here, but the people God was trying to get them to realize that they needed to put him first. Which, right down the road, they have the attack on Jericho right after this, and then the AI and the defeated AI. They didn't ask God what to do. And that's a big deal. They didn't ask. He's telling them, you need to have a commitment to me, but then they went on and, we'll just go willy-nilly down the road and don't need much to go attack AI, and didn't ask God about it.
We can do it. And the we can do it is
And
dangerous.
that was the pattern that they had. They didn't ask God. When I can't even think of what the Gibeonites came. They didn't ask God for direction there. They just did it. You know.
And
Yeah,
then
they're
they
from a
found
far
out,
country. They have moldy
oops.
bread and holy shoes, and so they're from.
They believed
country.
him.
But they didn't ask God.
So here's the thing. Is circumcision a good thing to do in enemy territory?
Not any more than what we would think of Jehoshaphat putting the church choir in front of the army. This is not something you say, well, we're in the enemy territory. We're going to be fighting battles. Let's get circumcised.
And
That
yet
must
there
be
was a
something
good
new.
reason to do so. And that's what they followed. Okay, second question.
But
Okay.
the number one thing is there, they needed to have that commitment to God and reliance on Him. That number one, it wasn't about them and their power. It was what? It was God and His power. And they needed to remind it that all the time. And in Joshua, they kept getting reminded of that because they didn't always do that. Do we not do that? I have gone through my life sometimes and made decisions, and without asking God whether I should do them. And it's we get ourselves into trouble when we just
Run ahead of God.
run ahead of God.
And we need to learn from it. Okay, Passover is the next thing they did. Now, it kind of reminds me of Psalm 23 because set a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. So that's what they were doing. They were setting the Passover table up in the presence of their enemies. And in doing this, they were also putting themselves a little bit at risk. But
Yep.
they were also telling the surrounding nations, hey, we have a priority here. We have a priority.
And Passover was such a big deal because it took their minds of what God had done for them in the past, but also it was representing what the Messiah was going to do for them in the future. And that's that saying that says, and this is a key part, if you don't get anything else out of Sabbath school today, remember this. We have nothing to fear for the future. How much do we have to fear for the future? Nothing. Unless we forget how God has led us in the past. And when we forget how God has led us in the past, we have a lot to fear for the future. But if we remember what God has done for us, and each one of us can stand up and tell stories about how God has led us. And if we have that, and we have nothing to fear for the future unless we forget how God has led us in the past. And that Passover has dual meaning because it was, remember that the firstborn in Egypt were killed. The angel passed over the houses of the Israelites with the blood on their door. And also the lamb represented Christ, who was going to come and die for us. And so you've got both things, past and future. And that's a big deal. And it's putting their commitment to God. And then the next thing we have after the circumcision and the Passover was Jericho battle.
But,
It was totally God done, not
okay,
the people because they were so mighty and they were able to tear the walls down. God did all that.
now the Passover, there's one more thing brought out in the lesson about it, and that is that it goes even beyond Jesus' sacrifice now, and it's going and becoming a representation. What they're doing here, coming in and doing having Passover, then they're going to have the redeemed multitude passing into the New Jerusalem, into the heavenly Canaan, and this was also part of the antitype of them coming into Canaan. And so it goes even beyond into our eternal home. And I think that's pretty cool. So,
And the Passover we would think of the Passover solemnity being moved over to communion for us today.
yes,
I've met people through the years, and if you're one of those, that's great and wonderful. And I don't have anything against that, but they celebrate Passover, and they
as well as communion.
as well as communion, and that can be a blessing too. And I would think that would be a really good thing to think about, God leading us through in past times. But it's it's not something that we do as saying, okay, I want everybody to keep Passover. That's not a directive that we have in a Christian church right now. So.
Several years ago, shortly after I came, we actually had a, probably more of a reenactment of the Passover in the fellowship hall one, I think it was Sabbath evening. And they explained all the symbols, and they really went through it quite well. And no, we weren't eating lamb, but they...
That was a Jewish person that presented that, I believe, right?
It was the Weichels.
The Weichels, okay.
So if you were here, if you didn't come until the Weichels had left, then you missed it. But they presented this, and it was interesting. One of the most interesting things for me is that when they roasted the lamb, they used a wooden thing to somehow stretch the lamb, and it was in the form of a cross. I thought that was very interesting. But I missed out on learning it from, a Jewish person. I think it would have been an interesting thing to have heard from an actual Jewish. I have since, because we went to something recently in Standish about that explained all the symbolism. And I think that that's meaningful to us. Not that we need to be reenacting it or going through it often, but we need to be aware. Anyway, the next thing they did, well, on their way in, they're setting up altars. Now, they didn't just set up one. When they walked through the Jordan, what did they do?
They took up stones, one for each tribe, and made a monument.
Yeah. So they bring this out. So they're making monuments, they're setting up altars. And in the lesson, it talks about how a specific altar, which had been described in Deuteronomy long before they got into the Promised Land. Well, not super long, but still
Well, they set up an altar an altar, and then they put up. It's not clear how they set the stones up, but they put large stones, and then they put plaster over them, and then wrote all of the law, 10 Commandments, and all the things that Moses had written down, and they wrote that on the stones for them all to be able to see.
on the plaster, I'm sure. But it makes you wonder, could that still be around? And there is archaeology, I'm not going to say this right, archaeological evidence. And if you're interested, come and see me or text me, and I can text it to you because there's some actual sites that you could
About 20
look
years
in.
ago, it said that as they were doing excavations on Mount Ebal, they found an altar. Underneath that altar was an older altar, and after they got done with the archaeological excavation, they said that had been done 20 years before. I believe it was 2024. They decided, let's go through, because when they take all the stuff, and they're taking all the stuff out, they make a big mound, and it's garbage. They call it garbage pile. And they said, let's go through, and we're going to do wet sifting. We're going to take that stuff, and we're going to wash it. And
see if we find anything.
They came up with it was plaster inscription, and it has the name Yahweh on it, and testing and stuff. They said it came from the time of Joshua, came from the time of the conquest, and it's the oldest inscription with Yahweh on it. And like Lynn said, if you want to see, you'd have to look it up. It's a name this long on a www thing to look up, but if you're interested.
Yeah, it's going to be a little bit of
archaeological part it.
difficulty getting it to you, but we can. He probably is better at it than me. Anyway, so they set up this particular altar, and you remember Mount Ebal and Mount Gerizim. Ebal was the side with the curses. Gerizim was the side with the blessings. And there were half of the Israelites on each side.
Yeah, half the tribes are on one Mount Gerizim on the blessing side, and half of them were repeating the curses on the evil side. It's interesting that that's where the altar is on
The evil
the curses
side.
side. And it said, those curses, we're under the curse because have we all failed? Yeah, we've all failed. And we're under the curses, but Christ's sacrifice takes care of that. And that sacrifice with the altar is there as a representation that the sacrifice of the coming Messiah was going to take care of all this. And it's interesting that that's how that was put in there. I don't know if any of you saw that on the lesson, but it was very interesting.
Okay. Written on stones. That was interesting. It's also interesting that not only were they to write the 10 Commandments, but also the laws of Moses that Moses had written. And it very specifically said that Moses had written, because the 10 Commandments
Were written by
God had written. So that was interesting. And then it talks about communion and how at communion we get the opportunity to rededicate ourselves. We haven't had communion for quite a while here. It's been difficult with our in-between pastors things. I don't know that there's a reason we can't do communion without the pastor, but we just haven't done it. And it gives us a chance. And communion with the foot washing, which is it's a smaller baptism. It takes care of the sins that we've committed since our original commitment to the Lord. And now we have a chance to
rededicate ourselves.
rededicate. Jesus said, as often as you eat this bread and drink this cup, you show the Lord's death till he comes. Some churches do communion every week. Some churches do once a month. Our church traditionally does it once a quarter because we didn't want it to become commonplace. We wanted it to be a special thing.
Many, many years ago, we had a UPS driver when we lived down in Georgetown, and they became friends of ours. And in fact, my son and daughter-in-law rented their house when he decided, he said, I've been in, God has led me to the point where I want to become a pastor. And he ended up going to the Church of Christ in Texas. There's a Lubbock, Texas, where he was going. He says, we want to borrow your trailer, your truck and your trailer to take all our stuff. And I says, well, I'll do that. But if you borrow my truck and trailer, you'll have me going along with you. So I went with him. We had good discussions and stuff, and it was very interesting until we were on our way back from Lubbock, Texas, because we had to come back, and we were Lake Tahoe, about coming over on Highway 50 over the mountains. And they said, how often does your church have communion? Well, it's not something, I said, we have it once a quarter. So it's not commonplace. We just something we do every week. It's not that, and we do it once a quarter. And they said, what? They wouldn't speak to me the rest of the time because in their church they did it every week. And if you didn't do it every week, then you missed out on whatever. And it was very interesting. It was shocking to me. Sometimes we find out things that we didn't know about maybe some other denominations that, we naively go through life and not know anything about it. And I'm not saying anything about Church of Christ or not, but they wouldn't speak to me the rest of the trip until we got back. And that said goodbye, thank you very much. And they were so shocked that we had communion once a quarter. Anyways.
Now, Thursday's lesson, I think, may be one of the most important, because the title of it is Longing for His Presence. Do we long for His presence? Do we show it? Yeah, try to.
How many times did we think about that? Boy, I just can't wait till this to be all over and reach our heavenly home.
Mom thinks about that every day right now, several
And
times a
this has
day.
been something that's been going on, that longing all through our human experience, been longing. In Hebrews, it talks about it's the chapter of faith, the faith chapter, talking about all the people and all the stuff that happened to them, and they were naked, they were starving to death, and they were passing through with all the trials and things that they had. But it said they were looking for something better. They were looking for a city whose foundations were built by God. And isn't that what we're built? That's what we're looking for. You know, all this junk and garbage and things that we deal with is going to be over someday. And we'll be going to our heavenly home. And that longing for Christ's presence. But we can have glimpses of Christ's presence with our relationship with Him now. As we experience the Sabbath blessing that we have with that time with God, little glimpses in there every once in a while that we get of what that's going to be like.
We read about this last night out of Last Day Events. And in there, it's section is lifestyle of the remnant, or lifestyle of those waiting for Christ to come. And it's interesting, we can spend a whole lifetime declaring that we are believers in Christ, declaring that we have faith in Him to save us. But unless we have a desire to be with Him, a desire to be with Christ, a desire for His Word, and a longing to be with Him, our hope of salvation is in vain. Because, you know, He said that of a large group of believers, I never knew you. And
they said, but Lord, we did all this stuff.
right.
They did things, but they didn't have the relationship with Him. He didn't know them, they didn't know Him.
So a declaration of salvation, or me declaring that I have faith in Christ, isn't enough.
No.
We have to put that into be able to practice.
Me having a personal relationship with God and desiring to be with Him. If I don't desire to be with Him, then my religion is in vain.
Yes.
And I go back to this a lot because it means a lot to me. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego facing the fiery furnace. They put that into, when the rubber met the road, they put their trust in God. That relationship that they had with God. Our God is able to deliver us, but even if He chooses not to, we're still not going to bow down to that image. And that's putting our trust in God and putting that into practice. Not just saying, yeah, I'm Christ's follower, but when times get tough, I'll go do something else.
Diana.
All of us have God's presence in us, and it's amazing to see even the Israelites who were in hostage. Some of them didn't believe in God, but at the time of their tribulation that they were going through, one of them had a crack in the wall, and he looked to that crack as a source of God. But then when that crack was gone, it was a light, and then it was a crack, and then it was darkness. He had nowhere to turn, but he knew there is a God. And because our presence feels that God. thing, God brings us to him. And that's where we become believers of God, because we get into that time.
Thank you. Okay, we have about 7 minutes according to the clock. So,
And we got that, oh, yep, that's the thumbs up from upstairs.
okay,
I don't know
so,
if you noticed, but we have directions from up above. They're on a different level than the rest of us are.
yes, we have learned to take direction from above.
If
But-
you're at Quincy, there's been many times, their sound system is in this little part that sticks out at the back, if you've been up there. And if Dana and Rob are up there, Dana has this angelic voice that projects. And if you didn't know they were up there when they're doing sound service, her voice comes from up above, and
Sounds like the
all
angels are singing with us.
Dana's up above there, and so anyways,
Beside
she
the
has
point.
an angelic voice.
So the thing is, I think that the longing for his presence is where we all need to be now, especially now, but all of our lives. And we can't do anything about where we've been, whether it's been good or bad. We can't really take credit for the good. It's all God. We just need to keep pressing forward and looking to him. And I think that's really important. One of the things in here talks about how Joshua had set up the sanctuary. They set up the sanctuary before they attacked Jericho. And in doing this, it showed God is here. God's here with us. And it was before people got their land, God got his. He put him in first. And they talked about that kind of toward the fact that our eyes need to be on our heavenly sanctuary. And that's where our hope is, because our hope is in Jesus, and that's where Jesus is. So we need to keep that in mind. Now, Friday's lesson pointed out that the communion service should not be time when we're sorrowing. We go through the preparation time, which would be the foot washing. And when we're going through that, we may need to do a little sorrowing. We may need to swallow our pride and apologize to someone before we partake of the emblems. When we're doing these things, it's okay to be sorrowing and asking for forgiveness from God and mankind, our brothers and sisters. And it doesn't matter what the past has been, we're taking care of that and we're putting it in the past. This is Friday, the last paragraph, it's Ellen White's comments, it's Desire of Ages, 659. And we're supposed to just leave that in the past because it's taken care of during the foot washing. So now when we leave that and we walk into the rest of the ceremony, all of this is done, and we come in now, and we're clean. We come in clean. We've taken care of everything, and now we're not to stand in the shadow of the cross, but in the saving light of the cross. I thought that was really interesting. It's not about the shadow, it's the light. The Lord is not shadow. In him there is no darkness at all, but the light. And open the soul to the bright beams of the Sun of Righteousness. Now we have about 3 minutes if anyone has something that you were hoping I would talk about, or Steve would talk about, and we didn't. Or you've thought of it since we started, and you didn't get to feel like you had a chance to get up and say something. So you have a couple minutes. If not, okay.
Wednesday's lesson down at the bottom. Can the hubbub and things going on detract us from keeping our eyes on God? The lesson brings that out in a couple places. And it can. That hubbub, the things going on, big or small, can have an effect on us on how our keeping our focus on God. Because sometimes the other stuff get in the way. And as I mentioned a couple times in here, Joshua has a lot of experiences where the hubbub, big things and little things, got in the way of the people keeping their focus on God. And they let other stuff get in the way. And when they did that, they ended up getting into trouble. And that's something that is here for us as an example of keeping our focus on God. And when we do that, it keeps us from going sidetracked, and which so easily happens. And the
Very
Israelites
easily.
and Joshua are prime examples of what happens to us when we let the distractions keep us from that relationship with God, because it sidetracks us over. Because we're going to need to.
It's time. Let's bow our heads. Our Father, thank you for the lesson. Thank you for this set of lessons. They're taking Old Testament stories and they're showing how we can focus on you more closely because of what's happened in these stories. They're putting the whole picture of each story on you and what you've done and how it can impact and improve our relationship with you. We ask that you give us an even deeper desire for that relationship with you, even deeper than we already have. We ask that you give us a hunger and a thirst after righteousness. We ask that we put you first in our lives, in every part of our lives, and that we not forget you, no matter what's going on around us, that we keep looking to you. And Lord, help us remember that through all this, we are in a major spiritual warfare, that our devil is trying so hard because he wants to take everybody with him that he can get. And misery loves company, and he's miserable. And help us to remember that we are on your side and you are on our side. And you will be there for us, and you will help get us through as long as we keep looking to you and holding on to you. And we ask you to help us, because even holding on to you is something that's difficult for us. We don't always even realize that. And help us not to rest on our laurels and feel like we've done fine, we've been doing fine, we're going to be okay. Help us to remember it's a daily thing, it's an all-the-time thing. We want to be more like you. Help us to keep our eyes on you. In Jesus' name, amen.